It's 6 o'clock and I definitely want to maximize our time together. So I guess I'll just keep admitting people as they show up. But Puro, thank you for joining me today. We're going to have a fun time. I had a chance to talk to you a few times before this, and every time I talk to you, you blow my mind. So I'm excited to talk. I'm going to introduce you in a second, Puro. I want to thank everybody for coming online and joining us today. This is brought to you by Qbay Center. We're in North San Jose on Tasman. We're a business incubator focused on life sciences. We essentially help people launch their business. We brought Puro on because he's one of our mentors, and he committed himself to helping out our entrepreneurs and small businesses as we look to grow. And for those of you who don't know who Puro is an author. He's written History of Silicon Valley, Humankind 2.0. His background is originally in AI and has been in AI for more than 30 years. He's the founding director of the Artificial Intelligence Center at Olivetti since 1995. He is now the president of Silicon Valley Artificial Intelligence Research Institute. He's the founder of the Laser and Last Festival. Laser stands for the Leonardo Science Evenings Speaking Series. Did I get that right, Puro?
Close enough.
Okay, all right. It spreads to more than 30 universities worldwide. Puro still personally runs the original series at University of San Francisco and Stanford. The Last Festival stands for Life, Art, Science, and Tech, and it is one of the most attractive interdisciplinary events in Silicon Valley, staged twice at Stanford and twice at San Jose State. And a little bit later, we'll be talking about bringing the Last Festival here to Qbay. Hopefully this year, if we can start to lift some of these restrictions of our safe at home order. So without any more introduction, I want to dive right in and talking with Puro. Puro, I know these are strange circumstances. I wish you could be here. I wish we could be filling our event center, and I know you would pack this place out, but we'll roll with the punches. How you been doing on this lockdown? You've been keeping yourself busy?
Yeah. So, I mean, my life has changed only in terms of travel. And I used to travel a lot, and now I don't. But, most of what I do is reading and writing, listening to music. So from that point of view, it hasn't been a big sacrifice. I feel very sorry for the people who have a job that cannot be done from home.
Yeah. Well, I know with all the news going on right now, much of it is consumed with the coronavirus, but you've been keeping up to date on some innovations, and I'm excited to hear what has kind of shown up under the radar these last few months.
Yeah, it's that's one reason why I was eager to do this interview. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 has monopolized the news, and people didn't notice some great news of the last few months. I think actually the last 6 months have given us some impressive news in many different fields. Here I have, between the computer and written notes, I have material to speak for hours. I'll just go through some of the main ones, if it's okay with you. Okay, so let's start with AI. Just 3 weeks ago, Google announced that a robotic dog learned by imitating a real dog. This is an old idea. As usual, when Google does it, people pay more attention. It's another idea that maybe robots should learn by imitating animals. The idea has been around for a while, but only recently, and I should actually credit the group of Sergey Levin at UC Berkeley, even before Google. Only recently they used deep reinforcement learning. Deep reinforcement learning is a complicated word, but it's basically the technology popularized by AlphaGo. So this could create a generation of robots that learn faster and learn more important things about moving in the real environment. And about AlphaGo. AlphaGo's grandchild, which is called Agent 57, has learned to play all of 57 Atari video games, which, that's before COVID-19, this would have been a big news. And this result was achieved by adding a new component to deep reinforcement learning, curiosity. Actually, AI has been researching curiosity for a long time. So what's curiosity? It's what we do. I mean, children running around the house, what are they doing? They're curious. And by being curious, you learn things. So that's a significant addition to reinforcement learning. This could make programs that learn in a more natural way. And in understanding language, there are two sectors of AI that are converging to create systems that can understand text, like a book, an article, and then answer questions about it. In the last few years, the two systems have been developed called Elmo and BERT, many others, but these are the two most famous. These are systems that can read the text and then they can answer some questions about it. And the advantage, of course, is that, their performance is not as good as human performance, but they can do it 24 hours a day at lightning speed over millions of text. So that's very useful if you're just doing a research and you need to read papers. Traditionally, a scientist would read a paper a day, 2 papers a day. These things can read thousands of papers. And then, so this technology that has been developed over the last few years now is getting married to what I call theory formation, which is another branch of AI that has not been very successful. And the idea of theory formation is that you study the data and you come up with a theory. That's what physicists do. That's what Kepler did. That's what many scientists did. In 2016, a famous Japanese scientist, right now the name Hiroaki Kitano, asked, can an AI win a Nobel Prize? What do you have to do to win a Nobel Prize? Well, you have to study the data, read a lot of papers, and then come up with your own new scientific theory. So this is also coming up. And the importance, of course, in our times is obvious. We have so many papers in life science, but who has the time to read all of them and understand what can be useful for their research? Microsoft and the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Seattle have created the COVID-19, what's it called? COVID-19 Open Research Dataset, CORD-19. So last time I checked, it had 24,000 research papers from scientific journals. This dataset is publicly available. You can read your own AI and see if you can discover something that virologists haven't discovered yet. And the Allen Institute also launched a competition called, well, I'm not sure about the name. Anyway, launched a competition with a prize for the team that can provide the best approach to a number of challenges with this data set. So that's a new kind of AI that is becoming practical. So that's, and I could go on with AI. These are things that can be very useful in research. Then there's a field that I think it could be potentially very influential. These metamaterials, these are new materials and typical design materials that are stronger, more flexible, superconducting. They have a lot of interesting properties. Unfortunately, they're very difficult and expensive to make. And in particular, the ones based on the element carbon. The most famous of these materials is graphene, but its applications so far have been very few. In November last year, so 5 months ago, Joel Thurian at the University of Massachusetts discovered a new carbon-based material, U-carbon. And again, I think in normal times, this would have been big news. I mean, it's a magnetic metamaterial. It's similar to graphene. It's eventually it's made of carbon, but it's magnetic. What does it mean? That you could create a very teeny vectors, very teeny, I don't know what to call it, robots that you insert in the human body, and they can travel around and do things. And because it's magnetic, you can control them from the outside. Now, right now, the problem is how do you control something that you enter the human body? By the way, why this would work? Because it's made of carbon. And carbon, I mean, life is made of carbon, so it can travel in the bloodstream without killing us. So the fact that it's magnetic makes it possible to control. So this opens a new perspective, new horizons to biosensors, drug delivery vectors, and so on. So that's for metamaterials. And then some interesting stories in the brain-computer interfaces. There's 3 labs, actually, not 1 lab. 3 labs at Stanford got together. Nicholas Melosh, Jun Ding, and Chichelnitsky. They got together. These are all famous scientists at Stanford. They spent years, actually, developing a device that can record the activity of the neurons in the brain. Of course, we have many such devices, but this one can record hundreds of neurons at the same time, and it can make a video. They insert thin wires in the brain, then connect them to a silicon chip. That's another big thing. It's connected to silicon. So this thing goes to silicon. And right now, the demo they have uses the silicon chips from the camera. I'm simplifying, but basically that's how they make the video. It's like taking a video of what's going on inside your brain. This is a level of resolution, and just in terms of quantity, it could really lead to a major understanding of things about the brain. Then March 2020, just last month, I'm reading the date of the paper, 2 Texas scientists discovered a neuromorphic material, a material that behaves like the neurons in the brain. It's not made of the same material, but it has this switching mechanism similar to what happens to neurons. Neurons are triggered on and off, and as I speak, my brain has all these neurons are going on and off, influencing each other. So this material is similar, behaves in a similar way. And so what's the big deal here? These 2 Texas scientists were actually studying, if I understand correctly, how to optimize energy. Today, we waste, I think about 10% of the global energy is used to transmit, store, process data. So that's a huge waste of energy. And they were just looking for a way to optimize this amount of energy. So it's interesting that they came up with the material that behaves like the human brain. And if you think of it, the human brain is extremely good at optimizing energy when we do the amazing things that we do. Just listening to me now involves so much processing in the brain, and we do naturally. They estimate the brain uses 20 watts to do everything we do. So it's interesting that they came up with a material that behaves like the neurons in our brain. The advantage, of course, is that it can probably be the bridge between machines and computers. Unfortunately, this material has a horrible name, and I have to read it because I will never remember. Beta copper vanadium bronze. Hopefully they will come up with a simpler name in the future. Then I've seen one area that is interesting, but I don't want to spend too much time on this, is what I call the experience economy. I don't know who coined the expression, but basically it's a combination of augmented reality, virtual reality, and AI, new ways to experience things that are happening or things that could be happening. So there's more and more of this intersection. If you think of it, Snap is basically an augmented reality company that uses artificial intelligence today. And Microsoft has HoloLens 2, and then it has a very strong deep learning team. So we see this merge between these two things. And I think as you think now of distance learning and distance shopping and distance everything, the progress in the experience economy will become more and more important. But even without this COVID-19, I think this was a trend. And 3D holography, I mean, you could have very soon a 3D movie in your room without using the special equipment. So so the experience economy is going to be eventually big. I mean, it's going to be I don't know if we replace movie theaters and rock concerts, but potentially it's big. Then bioscience, that's the the main focus of your incubator, right? So let's just a few things about the bioscience. It's amazing that we missed some spectacular discoveries. For example, scientists in Ohio are testing a new universal Ebola vaccine that can fight all 4 Ebola viruses. There are actually 4 Ebolas, not just one. And by the way, I'm not completely sure that there's only one COVID-19. If you look at the death rates in Europe, in East Asia, New York, California, they're so different that sometimes I wonder if there's, if that virus too has already mutated. Anyway, for Ebola, we know there are at least 4 different ones, and we don't have a vaccine, as far as I know, that works with all of them. So this one is universal. It fights all of them, which, I mean, next time we have an Ebola epidemic, this can save thousands of lives. And talking about vaccine, there is a new way to make them with the cell-free systems. Most of synthetic biology relies on cell-based systems. You take a living cell and you introduce new genetic instructions in it. I'm simplifying a lot, but that's what happens. You need a living cell. And this is not trivial. This is not trivial for many reasons. And also it's dangerous because it's a living organism that you are producing. In fact, the applications are actually very limited. We talk a lot about synthetic biology, but actually it hasn't generated billions and billions of dollars. That's why we still don't have low-cost biosensors that we can use, for example, in this current epidemic. That's why we don't have, it's not cheap to make these CAR T cells that could fight cancer. These are supposed to be the killer applications of synthetic biology, but they're just very difficult and expensive to make. So what are cell-free systems? These are different because they don't rely on the living cell. They engineer the cell, and then this artificial cell is born with the genetic instructions that you want. Think of it as a programmable liquid that turns DNA into RNA, into protein, just like a regular cell, but it's actually not a living cell. And this means that it's safer in the human body, and it can be stored at room temperature and many other things. And there's actually an 8-year history of cell-free systems. Cell-free systems have been around for a very long time. Why is it important for vaccines in particular? Because cell-free biomanufacturing is particularly well suited for vaccine production. This was demonstrated in 2010 in Israel, and then there's been a lot of progress. 2017, there was an important study in Japan that showed that cell-free biomanufacturing is very good for vaccines, and and biosensors. Now, startups like Sutro Biopharma in South San Francisco and others have been working for decades on cell-free system. Why do I mention it now? Because again, last month, March 2020, a joint team of Northwestern University and Shanghai Tech University used the cell-free method to make something called valinomycin. Now, I don't know what valinomycin is, but the big news was that by using a cell-free approach, they increased production by more than 5,000 times. If we discover a vaccine right now for COVID-19 or some useful biosensor, it takes a long time to scale to produce the quantities we need. So cell-free biomanufacturing would increase by thousands of times the ability to make these things. And by the way, I expect a boom in the field of biosensors. Everybody's talking about the vaccines and testing kits, ventilators, and so on. But we are forgetting that if we had biosensors, a lot of things would be easier. So there's Sensible Medical and Early Sense in Israel, Profusa and Cerebell in the Bay Area, Infobionics and Glimpse in Boston and others, Endotronics in Chicago, Strella, I think, is in Philadelphia. There's so many of these, Oxford Molecular in Britain, Lucentix in Switzerland. There's I'm sure many also in China. There's so many startups that are coming up in the field of biosensors. One important paper I want to mention, it's just science, but I think it's another thing that would have made big news. I don't know if it has already been published, but the preprint version has been circulating for a while. It was written by Anthony Jose from the University of Maryland. We have a DNA-centric view of biology, of life, right? DNA has the instructions. Some people even think DNA tells you everything. It tells you not only how tall you will be, but even how intelligent you will be, and so on. The dogma is that transmission, storage, and encoding of all the biological information is in the DNA. The problem is, if a biologist, the greatest biologist in the world, didn't know that a cat has eyes, and I just showed that the DNA of the cat, the scientists would not be able to guess that the cat has eyes and the eyes are in the head. It would be able to guess that the eyes are black. So the DNA doesn't seem to have all the information, actually, doesn't seem to have all the instructions. So Anthony Jose has introduced a new paradigm. He says the DNA is like the shopping list when you go to a supermarket and buy ingredients. Where are the instructions? He says they're outside the DNA. Where are they? Well, there's a number of molecules, they use the DNA and do things with it, and that gets complicated. But the paradigm shift is important. If he's right, there's a whole new way to look at life and also to explain things that are not well explained. I mean, we know very little about gene regulation, actually. At the beginning, I was just one cell in my mom's womb. How did that cell divided, multiplied? But how is it at one point you have an embryo with 2 arms and 2 legs and so on? So our explanation for this thing is still kind of not complete. So this new approach could be very interesting. Now, a question that comes up very often is can we accelerate the production of new drugs? And in that field also, there's been just 2 weeks ago an announcement by SRI International here in Menlo Park that teamed up with a French startup called Ictos. And SRI has this platform called Symphony, And Ictos is a French startup that specializes in applying artificial intelligence to drug design. And that's an example of what is happening also in the field of drug discovery, trying to use artificial intelligence to accelerate drug discovery, to accelerate. Today, it takes sometimes 10, 15 years to come up with a new cure for a disease. 2 years ago, I gave a talk in Hangzhou, organized by our biotech partners of Firestone, where I spoke about the application of AI to discover drugs. And so I'm happy when I hear this kind of projects. Okay, that's enough for now. That's more that I can think of much more of great news of the last 6 months that were sort of obliterated by all this attention for COVID-19, and that's a pity.
Well, I think that was pretty good. Just off the top of your head, by the way, I think that was pretty good. Super fascinating about the DNA and the sequencing and figuring out how it's mapped. I mean, fascinating. I think we could park there for a while and explore that a little bit more. But I'm kind of noticing as I'm listening to you, I'm hyper focused on these details. And one of the things that you and I were talking about before is the balance in your work between the arts and the sciences. And kind of make a quick transition here from the sciences to the arts. We're going to be doing the last festival. Could you talk a little bit about how the last festival kind of came about? Because I'm just amazed on how you have really stood in that space of balancing science and art.
Yeah, so first of all, this is not unusual in the Bay Area. I actually think it's the secret of the well-kept secret of Silicon Valley. Actually, let me spend a few minutes on this. So I wrote a book on Silicon Valley, a history of Silicon Valley. And the reason I wrote the book, a friend convinced me to write it. Initially, I didn't want to write it. But the reason I wrote the book is that all the history of Silicon Valley missed something. There's obviously something missing in those books. If you go back to 1950, all the great universities were on the East Coast or in Europe. The big money was in New York and London. The biggest military investment was in Boston, probably. Nobel Prize winners, they were all Europeans or from the East Coast. Big electronic companies, Europe and East Coast. Engineers, computer engineers, East Coast and Europe. So Silicon Valley should have happened there. Why did it happen in the Bay Area? Bay Area was orchards, and then where the orchards end, you have desert. So that's why I wrote the book. And I started asking myself, what was special about the Bay Area in 1950? 2 Nobel Prizes in the whole of California. That's nothing. Princeton alone had many more. There were very few computers, very little technology. Mostly it was war stuff, things that came with World War II and then Cold War and so on. So if you lived in New York in 1950 and somebody asked you what is special about the Bay Area, or in 1960, or even in 1970, just 1 year before the microprocessor, if somebody asked you what's special about the Bay Area, you wouldn't answer technology. You would answer crazy artists, crazy musicians, crazy politicians, crazy philosophers. That was the specialty of the Bay Area. Think different, to use Apple's motto. That was what's special. So I started writing a cultural history of the Bay Area, and I realized how important the influence of those crazy minds was. They really created the background for thinking different, for using technology in a completely different way. And that has always been the secret of Silicon Valley. Just think of the technology that today you identify with Silicon Valley. Start with the internet, invented in Boston. The computer was invented in Cambridge, England. The transistor in New Jersey. Artificial intelligence, Boston. I can go on and on and on. Smartphone, Finland. You know, and then today people think Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley did not invent them. Silicon Valley hijacked them. You know, when this technology came here, the people here did something completely different with them. My favorite example is these kids at Xerox PARC with long hair, look like hippies, who one day decide, I want a computer on a desk. In 1970, a computer was gigantic, and they wanted a computer on a desk. You know for whom? For school children. Now, you have to be really, really crazy in 1970 to think that. But guess what? They built one. Eventually, somebody named Steve Jobs saw a demo, and you know the rest of the story. By the way, Steve Jobs, there's an interview, I think 1995, where they ask him what is the secret of the Macintosh, and he says what made the Macintosh so great was musicians and artists. So, you know, that intersection of art, science, technology has always been the secret of Silicon Valley. And in my opinion, the reason, so everybody tries to build their own Silicon Valley, right? Maybe France was the first one, China, of course, many cities, Asia, Europe, you go to Latin America, everybody wants to have a Silicon Valley, and nobody has a Silicon Valley. By the way, even the United States, the only place that is a little similar to Silicon Valley is Boston, which is another place specialized in crazy minds. Why? Because they don't have the crazy artists and the crazy musicians, you know? And when I say it like this, it sounds funny, but that's really what is missing in other places. So, by the way, I can give you so many trivia. Everybody knows Gordon Moore's law, the law that computers get faster exponentially and so on. 1 year before, very few people know this, the first exhibition of computer art took place in San Jose. San Jose was the first place where we had an exhibition of computer art, where it was even difficult to have a computer. In 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh. Well, guess what? In 1984, San Jose State University opened the Cadre Laboratory, which was one of the very first laboratories for digital interactive art and so on. And for many years was run by our friend Joel Slayton, whom you met, who is the curator of the last festival now. So this thing has been around for a while, this intersection of art and science. So my humble contribution has been in 2008 to start the lasers, Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous, that now take place in 40 plus universities. And they just put together art and science. You come to listen to the physicist, I force you to listen to the artist, and vice versa. And then the last festival that typically happens once a year, where we put together art and scientists and technologists for a weekend, and it's more like fun, interactive, and so on. Unfortunately, this year, we don't know if it will happen. It was scheduled to happen now at your place, and now we have to come up with a backup plan. But I hope I gave you an idea why. Let me say a few more things, because artists are really underestimated by engineers. Recently I heard a talk by an artist called Tom White. Tom White is training AI system to make art. Now you will say, oh, well, we've seen this before. Yeah, but he's training AI systems to make art for AI systems, meaning he trains a system to make art, then he takes the art and fits it into another AI system to see what happens. And the other AI system appreciates the art. He's making AI art for AI, which is an interesting twist on the idea of machines making art. Now we're also making machines that are art critics, that it's art for them. or recently, one thing I didn't speak about because there's so many new things, but in the tech magazines, they've been talking a lot about xenobots. These are biological robots, the result of mixing AI and biotech. Xenobots, xenobots could be the doctor of the future. Surprise, the idea was actually pioneered by an artist called Carl Sims. And I'll forget which year, but I suspect it's more than 20 years ago. In the COVID emergency, I want to mention my friend Bob Horn, who is a political scientist. He works with artists to make giant murals that describe a complex situation where you have to make critical decisions. He works with artists to make these things. So the last festival doesn't come, doesn't exist in a vacuum. I think it's a specialty of our area, the Bay Area, to have this these different strands of creativity that influence each other. Yeah. Okay. Open Lab in Santa Cruz. It's a lab of scientists, of artists that use science. I could go on forever.
I love that. I could park right there for a while, because what it starts to trigger in me, I lean more towards the arts. I mean, I made no mistake about it. I made no bones about it at our opening ceremony that I'm a comm major. I'm fascinated by what you do. And so the integration of arts and science has me asking, are machines going to be able to take this ability, merge it with science, and develop emotional intelligence? I mean, that's kind of like what's hanging out there. What are your thoughts in terms of expanding consciousness and integrating AI and emotional intelligence? Does that have an intersection?
Maybe. I think it's one of the ideas we can pursue these days. I think that's why we need artists, because they think different about technology. And so they are the ones who are coming up with these strange ideas on how to use technology. And I personally value that a lot. And there's an evolution of machines that it's fascinating to look at. I don't think it's scary. Unfortunately, it's not scary, because technology is still so pathetic, in my opinion. This AI is still very primitive. But it is evolving, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes next. So artists can be the ones who provoke the right kind of questions in my opinion.
Okay, all right. I'll keep being crazy in that area. So yeah, Qbay at Qbay Center, we're looking forward at some point, once these orders are lifted, to having the last festival and continuing the laser series here. So if you're in San Jose, follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We'll post when Puro will be in the area, when we're going to be hosting the last festival, the speakers for the laser. Qbay has an exciting relationship with Puro, and we're excited to see how that develops over the next few years. I have to ask you, Puro, about the new book you're putting together with Peace Tech. I heard that's exciting.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's link it to intelligence. I was reading a book that was talking about the real superintelligence, superhuman intelligence. All this talk about machines getting more and more intelligent. No. The superintelligence is us. When we group together and we share knowledge, we create superhuman intelligence. Why? Because the individual could not do what he does when he uses knowledge from other people. And this is true also of great scientists. I mean, Einstein used knowledge from other scientists. This is true of things we do every day. Every day we do something, we call a friend, hey, how do you do this? Or these days we go on the web and look for the answer. So sharing knowledge is really the secret to create the super intelligence that we have in the world, where we can achieve things without actually knowing exactly, without being specialists. We can find the knowledge out there. In the old days, it was the library, today is the web. But the idea has always been that humans collaborate, share knowledge, and by doing this, we become more intelligent, okay? Okay, so this technology is a technology that helps collaboration, helps improve the amount of collaboration. I have to think how to introduce it. You can see peace technology as technology that increases the amount of collaboration. There is a way to measure peace between people. If we are not fighting each other, we have peace, but it's very small. When we start collaborating and creating value together, the amount of peace increases. You have to read our book that was really mostly written by Jingxian Yu. But this is a field that covers computer science, mathematics, sociology, gaming, many other technologies. Unfortunately, the book is available only in Chinese. And it came out as a collaboration with the Peace Innovation Lab at Stanford. That is the one that has developed all the math, the algorithm, and so on to calculate the amount of peace. Now, this is particularly useful when you have to make decisions about complex situations like the current pandemic. I didn't want to talk about COVID-19, but this is a good place to mention it. For example, a few days ago, I saw in the news that a system called Swarm was recently used by the Australian government to make decisions about the COVID-19 pandemic. Swarm helps a team of experts in various disciplines to rapidly come up with a consensus view. Now, that's an example of peace technology work. The Peace Innovation Lab at Stanford has prepared what they call PeaceX Global Response to create a common operating picture of the pandemic through data collected from a network of universities and by citizen scientists. So these are examples of how you use peace technology to increase collaboration. There's methods that help people work together, create value together. And in this specific case, it's really about putting together minds from different fields and reaching consensus rapidly in a very critical situation. It's a pity the book is all in Chinese, because it would be inspirational for everybody. It's how the world should be run instead of constant arguing, bickering, and finger pointing. That's in a few words.
Great. Well, I'm excited to read it. Peace Talk. I don't speak Chinese, so hopefully it'll get the English version. I think it's fascinating considering that we still have this divide between engineers and artists. Maybe we could read that book to each other and get along. So one of the questions from our viewers is, what are you most excited about the next 5 years?
Well, lots of things. I have to think. I think it is exciting. See, we have to look at the positive side in negative things. I mean, this pandemic is very serious. But it's an opportunity to create a new world. We've had a crisis before. I mean, the Spanish flu came in the middle of World War I. And still, after the Spanish flu, after World War I, we had the boom of creativity. I mean, we had the Dada, the futurists, a lot of interesting things. In the 80s, we had the AIDS epidemics. People already forgot. I mean, millions of people have died of AIDS. They're still dying of AIDS. By the way, we never found a vaccine for AIDS. But that's the age when we had punk rock and the new wave. For some of us, it was a very creative period. So you have to think what will come out of this pandemic. I mean, all this distance learning, the Zoom we're doing now, what's going to become next? as we were thinking about the last festival, we're thinking, how do we do it online? You know, there are online exhibitions, but they're really boring. They're just pictures of the artwork. What's an artwork? What's an art installation when it has to be appreciated online? Suddenly you start thinking differently, you know. It could be a way to link to the studio of the artist. It could be something that lives only online. If it lives only online, then maybe they can interact. Maybe they can talk to each other. You know, you can have artworks online that do something together. So you know that I'm mildly, I don't want to sound rude because people are dying, but I'm mildly excited by the fact that this pandemic is forcing us to think in a different way, and maybe will let us see things differently. I mean, think of a simple pro of this pandemic here in Silicon Valley: traffic. And I mean, we solved the problem of traffic. People work from home, and I mean, we are lucky in Silicon Valley. So many people can work from home. Again, I'm very sorry for the places where this cannot happen. But maybe it will encourage more people to work from home. This is proving to a lot of companies that you can work from home and sometimes be even more productive. Why a company, why a startup has to spend so much money for real estate in Palo Alto? Makes no sense. And most likely, they can work from home. And by working from home, they produce less carbon dioxide, use less air conditioning. I don't know. So, so this pandemic can teach us useful things for the future. And specifically in technology and science, I hope the message will not be lost. And it really hurts when you listen to Bill Gates, for example, talking at TED in 2015 and talking about the danger of a pandemic, how unprepared we are, and so on. And guess what? We really were, you know. So I hope that now we will invest in preparing for the next one. There will be a next one. It could be in 10 years, it could be in a century. It's like earthquakes. We know it will come. And so how will we prepare for that? Fascinating. All these apps on smartphone that trace who you have been near to. That's very interesting. It could be useful also in other fields. Biosensors. I want to see biosensors everywhere. I want to have one in my home that tells me if there is a germ that I don't like. I want to have wearables that tell me what's happening to my body in real time. And of course, it would be nice to have vaccines. If, my hope for next year really is that somebody not only develops a vaccine for this one, but starts thinking about developing vaccines for diseases that don't exist. So we have all these robots, we have all these robotic labs, we have AI, and as I said, so many people are working on applying AI to biotech. Can we create a lab in the basement of the CDC or whatever with robots that just produce, first of all, think of a new disease that doesn't exist, and then produce the vaccine. They don't produce the virus, they produce the vaccine. And they do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop, non-stop, non-stop. And so by the end of the year, we have produced thousands of potential vaccines. And we can test them first on animals, make sure they don't cause problems, maybe also on people, just to make sure that they don't cause problems. When the new disease comes, when a new pandemic comes, we can just match it to the thousands of potential vaccines that have been created in that lab. And if we are lucky, we have the vaccine. Not in one day, because biologists keep teaching me how complicated it is to be really sure that it's okay, and then to manufacture it, to distribute, to deploy. Okay, fine, but it would take weeks, not years. So mildly excited about what the pandemic is teaching us. And and also mildly excited about the cultural impact of this. And until last year, there was too much enthusiasm for the future. There was, I mean, all these people talking about the singularity and super intelligent machines, immortality, and suddenly here we are talking about mortality. Here we are confined at home because a microscopic virus is more powerful than all of our technology and science. So there's some good things that will come out of this.
All right. Yeah. One of the questions that we had coming out of China is, do you think that AI could benefit us in coming up with a vaccine to make us stronger, to be more prepared? But it sounds like from your vision looking forward that's upon us, that's there.
Yeah. So we have the tools. I'm not sure if they're powerful enough. In my book on AI, um, I emphasize how weak AI is, how primitive it is. I mean, just because it can recognize a tree, it doesn't mean it can do what a scientist does. But the big advantage of these tools, the big advantage of these AI tools, like all software, they can work 24 hours a day. No holidays, no sick days. They can work non-stop. So you can use them to help you. Yeah, there's one particular gene. I remember which one. Somebody told me there are 70,000 papers, and this was a few years ago, published on that gene. The scientist who is studying that gene doesn't have the time to read 70,000 papers. So we need tools to help with these things, and then we have tools to simulate. So I think AI cannot be the solution. You will not have the AI that you see in the Hollywood movie and comes up with a solution. But you can have the number of AIs that help scientists do a lot of things that take time. Just speeding up human research would be so important. The sad thing that you don't find in Google and IBM press releases is that very few scientists right now can use these tools. That these tools are complicated to make. They have to be tweaked to work in a specific context. So at the end of the day, my dear friends at Stanford in neuroscience, in virology and so on, they only read about these things. They're not deployed. So all these bigger plans, particularly in China, to invest in AI are great, but we also have to start thinking how to deploy AI in laboratories, because the biggest advantage we can get from AI, from computers in general, is in the laboratory where the scientist is creating the future. And that's where we're still very, 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 very slow, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that was good. There's a lot of questions coming up. One of the questions just popped up right now is, do you think we live in a simulation? Okay, I was just reading that. And also another one on thoughts on comedy and art.
Comedy and art.
Yeah.
Comedy and art
All
sounds interesting, but maybe I'm not competent enough.
right.
But that sounds. Well, I would say comedy and science. Comedy and science is a very interesting topic. Anyway, are we in a simulation? How am I supposed to know? If I'm inside a simulation, I wouldn't know. So.
All right. I thought I'd throw those two together as a little comic relief. All right. So another one of the questions are, can we bring these laser speakers online? I mean, we're going to be bringing them here to Qbay. We should,
Yes. Well, that's a conversation that you and I should have, because it's a pity. See, like everybody else in the world, we suspended the lasers thinking, well, it's 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month. And now it's becoming the new normal, right? When will we be really able to have just 50 people in the same room? Now suddenly it's beginning to look like science fiction, So, so we have to start thinking seriously about this. One thing I noticed, which is kind of intriguing, I invited scientists to do Zoom webinars, and their problem is very simple: fatigue. You know, they teach classes on Zoom, so they've done it so many times. It's kind of hard to convince them. But I think if I try hard enough, they will. Artists are so reluctant to speak on Zoom. You know, if you look at the calendar of events at Stanford University and you check all the events that were canceled, all the talks by artists have been canceled. All of them. I didn't find an exception. I mean, these are talks. These are not demonstrations of the art. So that's kind of intriguing. And you really have to think what you lose if you are doing things on Zoom. And obviously there must be something that artists feel it's not there. I cannot see it. My background is science. I mean, in fact, I almost prefer speaking from home. But so it's something you and I should talk about and have conversations with creative minds in the spirit of Silicon Valley, the real spirit. It's interesting. I think we have to think, how do you make it really special for an online audience? There is something different about doing it with Zoom.
Yeah, we can have our coffee and sit down and let our creative minds kind of go wild and see what we can kind of come up with. I'm sure we could figure it out. And we had a good group today. A lot of people asking questions. Piero, I can't thank you enough for taking the last hour with us to talk. We're at the 7 o'clock hour right now. We hit our mark. You're a real professional hitting those marks. You told me on the first one, like, I'm gonna speak about 20 minutes, and you hit it within like the first 30 seconds. So thank you so much for speaking with us. Everybody who joined us tonight during dinner time, appreciate it. Again, I'm Brian. I'm with Qbay Center. We're a 112,000 square foot incubator with 15 biolabs. If you're curious about what we do here and how we can help you build your business, make connections, find funders, connect with me. You can connect with me on Instagram. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Look up Qbay Center, send me a message. I'd love to send you some more information. I definitely want to keep you up to date on the events that will be happening here at Qbay with Piero, with the Laser Series, and hopefully soon with the Last Festival. Piero, once again, thank you. I'm excited about the Peace Tech book. I hope, again, it comes out in English, but stay safe, and thank you so much for talking with me today.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to chat. Hope to see you in person at some point very soon.
Yeah, me too. All right, buddy. Take care, and we'll be talking soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right.